high above the noise of cities, where the air turns thin and crisp, and the clouds seem close enough to touch, lies a quiet world hidden among the towering peaks of the Swiss Alps. In these isolated villages, life moves at a different pace, slow, deliberate, and deeply connected to nature. This is the story of people who live not for convenience, but for survival, tradition, and a quiet kind of happiness. The morning began before the sun had even touched the peaks. Old Marcus opened his eyes to the soft chiming of cowbells echoing through the valley. It was a sound he had heard every day for over 70 years. To him, it was more reliable than any alarm clock. He sat up slowly, his bones reminding him of yesterday's labor, but his spirit remained steady. Outside his wooden chalet, frost still clung to the grass. The mountains stood tall, their snow-covered peaks glowing faintly under the first light of dawn. Marcus stepped out, breathing in the cold air deeply. This was his world, simple, harsh, but honest. His farm wasn't large. A few cows, a small barn, a patch of land where he grew vegetables, and a life built entirely by his own hands. In the village, everyone lived like this. There were no supermarkets nearby, no fast deliveries, no shortcuts. Everything had to be earned. Across the valley, Anna was already awake. She was younger, in her late 20s, but her life mirrored that of generations before her. With a woven basket strapped to her back, she walked along a narrow mountain path. The path was steep, winding through rocky slopes and patches of wildflowers. She moved carefully, used to the terrain. Her destination was the upper pasture where her family kept goats. The climb took over an hour, but she didn't complain. She had grown up doing this. Each step was part of her daily rhythm. When she reached the pasture, the goats greeted her with soft bleats. She smiled, kneeling beside one and beginning the morning milking. The wind brushed against her face, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh grass. There was no noise here except nature itself. Life in the Alps was not easy. Winters were long and unforgiving. Snow could block roads for days, sometimes weeks. Temperatures dropped far below freezing, and isolation became even more intense. But the villagers were prepared. They stored food, preserved cheese, and relied on each other. Marcus remembered winters when he couldn't leave his home for days. He would sit by the fire, carving wood or repairing tools. The silence could feel heavy, but he had learned to find peace in it. There is no loneliness, he often said, only quiet. In the center of the village stood a small church, its bell tower visible from every corner. It wasn't just a place of worship, it was the heart of the community. Every Sunday, villagers gathered there. Not just to pray, but to connect. They shared stories, exchanged goods, and helped one another. In a place where modern conveniences were scarce, community was everything. Anna loved these gatherings. They reminded her that despite the isolation, she wasn't alone. Everyone here understood the same struggles, the same joys. One afternoon, as clouds rolled in and shadows stretched across the valley, Marcus noticed something unusual. A young man was walking along the path, clearly not from the village. His clothes were too modern, his steps uncertain. He carried a backpack and looked around with curiosity and confusion. Marcus approached him. "You're far from the city," he said with a gentle smile. The young man laughed nervously. "I guess I am. I wanted to see what life is like here." Marcus nodded. "Then you should stay a while." The young man's name was Daniel. He had come from a busy city, tired of noise, stress, and endless deadlines. He had seen pictures of the Alps online and felt something calling him. But he wasn't prepared for what he found. There was no internet signal where Marcus lived. No instant communication. No distractions. At first, Daniel felt uneasy. The silence was overwhelming. But slowly, things began to change. Marcus put Daniel to work. "Life here is simple," he said. "But it is not easy." Daniel learned to wake before sunrise, to feed animals, to chop wood, to carry water. His hands blistered, his muscles ached, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. He began to notice small things. The way sunlight painted the mountains in gold. The sound of wind through trees. The satisfaction of finishing a task with his own hands. Anna met Daniel one evening at the village gathering. "You're the newcomer," she said with a smile. "I think everyone knows that," he replied. She laughed. "It's not every day we get visitors." They talked for hours. About life, about dreams, about the differences between their worlds. Daniel spoke of tall buildings, crowded streets, and constant noise. Anna listened with curiosity, but she couldn't imagine living like that. "And you?" Daniel asked. "Don't you ever want to leave?" Anna looked at the mountains, glowing under the sunset. "Why would I? she said softly. Days turned into weeks. Daniel stayed longer than he planned. He helped Marcus on the farm, learned from Anna, and slowly became part of the village. The people accepted him, not because he was different, but because he was willing to learn. One day, Marcus handed him a piece of cheese. I made this, he said. Daniel tasted it. It was rich, fresh, unlike anything he had ever had. This, Marcus said, is what happens when you give time to something. But life in the Alps wasn't just peaceful, it was also unpredictable. One winter storm arrived suddenly. The sky darkened, winds howled, and snow began to fall heavily. Within hours, paths were blocked, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Daniel had never experienced anything like it. Fear crept in. What do we do? He asked. Marcus remained calm. We wait. For 3 days, the village was cut off. No one could leave, but no one panicked. They had prepared for this. Food was stored, firewood ready. People checked on each other, ensuring everyone was safe. Daniel realized something important. In the city, people had everything, but depended on systems they couldn't control. Here, people had less, but relied on themselves and each other. When the storm passed, the village emerged slowly. Snow covered everything, turning the landscape into a white dream. The mountains looked even more majestic. Daniel stepped outside, taking in the view. I've never seen anything like this, he whispered. Marcus smiled. Now you understand. Spring eventually arrived. Snow melted, rivers flowed, and green returned to the valley. Life continued, just as it always had. Daniel knew it was time to leave. I can't stay forever, he said. Anna nodded. But you won't forget. On his last day, Daniel stood at the edge of the village. He looked back one last time. At the wooden chalets, the grazing animals, the endless mountains. He had come here searching for something. And he found it, not in comfort, but in simplicity. Not in noise, but in silence. Not in speed, but in patience. As he walked away, Marcus called out to him. Remember, he said, life is not about having more. It's about needing less. And with that, Daniel returned to the world below. But he was no longer the same. Because somewhere high in the Alps, among isolated villages and quiet lives, he had discovered what it truly meant to live.